Hey, what's up everybody? I'd like to welcome you to another Juice tutorial. And today what we're going to talk about is another way that we can improve our gain slider design, which is by creating a parameter that a user can automate over time. So just to give you a little demonstration about what I mean, I have an Ableton project open here, and I have two plugins on our channel. I have a slider that I've created similar to the first gain slider that I created two tutorials ago, and it's just a slider that goes between values of 0 to 1, so it's not even on the logarithmic scale, and is used just to control the volume of audio. So as you can hear, I've got a little guitar loop playing, and I can just turn that volume up and down, okay? But next to it, I have Ableton's utility plugin, which is very similar to the type of thing that we're doing here. Just turns the volume up and down. It can do some other stuff, but we won't worry about that for now. And we're gonna look at some differences in the way that these function and add some functionality. So the first thing that we're gonna do is, I'll just put this, I'll just open this a little bit bigger. Okay, make sure that we turn the volume up. And then if I click on this gain, which basically automates the volume of the plugin in the same way that that our slider does, you'll see that as I do it, this little red line goes up and down. Okay, now I'm going to assume that most of you know your way around the DAW, so you understand that this is a automation line. Okay, so if I wanted to automate this volume to go down over time, I could just click here, oh, not there, and then just do this, and you'll see that the volume goes down over time. Okay, so that's a parameter that we're automating. But if we take a look at our slider, when I move it up and I move it down, there's no corresponding red line, and that's because we haven't created a parameter that we can automate. So there's no way that any of our users will be able to control that parameter in real time, or be able to draw in automation to control the volume if they want the volume to go down over time. So it's not very useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a way to create the parameter so the user will be able to automate this over time. And then while we're at it, we're going to change this back to logarithmic scale, which is going to take us about 2 seconds. So we're going to do that. And along the way, we're going to go through a couple little C++ conventions that I've learned about along the way, and hopefully you'll find those useful. So we'll just close out Ableton here, and I'll just walk you through the project that we have at the moment. So this project is very similar to the one that I did 2 tutorials ago. It's just creating a gain slider where I have a slider that's going between the values of 0 and 1. I'm pushing those values into the processor on a float variable that we call gain value. And then on the processor, you can see here I have this variable, this float gain value, and that is just pushing values between 0 and 1 into and multiplying our buffer input times that value, and that's what's giving us our volume, whether we're keeping it the same or whether we're taking it or whether we're lowering the volume. Okay, if any of that stuff sounds unfamiliar to you or a little bit foreign, then you may want to check out my tutorial, my past 2 tutorials, and those will fill you in on the information that I just showed you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start figuring out how to do how to create a parameter that our users are going to be able to automate. So we have this class, and this is something that took me a little while to kind of just wrap my head around and just really figure out the correct syntax. And luckily, I was able to get some help from the Juce forums. And I should point out that if you ever have any trouble with, figuring out your project or figuring out how things need to be, the Juice forum is a fantastic forum to get in touch with some other developers that are a lot more experienced than myself, that have been doing this for a very long time, and they can help kind of point you in the right direction. So check out the Juice forum if you get a chance. So we have this class that we call Audio Processor Value State Tree. And what this does is we're able to use this to create a correlation between what we're doing with the between what we're doing on the processor side and what we're doing on the GUI side, and then give each of those parameters a name. So every parameter that the user is able to modify or automate over time, we need to give all of those a name. Okay, and this one we're just going to call gain. And so what we need to do is we need to create two different variables. So we have to create not variables, objects. So we have an audio processor value state tree object that we need to create. And we're going to create that. If you get confused, just remember processor. We're creating it on the processor side. Okay. And then on the other side, we create a audio processor value state tree slider attachment. Okay. Because we have a slider that we wish to automate, that we wish to give a name, a parameter name. And so we're going to create a slider attachment object on the plugin editor side, the GUI side, that is going to correspond to that, so that when we move the slider, that it knows that we're modifying the gain parameter, and that it's able to send a message to our plugin host that the gain is what we're looking to automate or that we're looking to modify. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started. I'm going to point out a couple different things along the way. So first thing that we need to do is we need to create a audio processor value state tree object. I'll just call it tree state. Okay. Now I'm going to put I'm going to use the initialization list to initialize the this object. Okay, so if I go down here, here's our object, and then it says processor that we want to connect to, so we want to connect to this processor. Undo manager we're not going to worry about for now, so I'm just going to put a null pointer there. And then one thing that I should point out is that I've taken a look in the argument of using an initializer list. An initializer list is where I have this. So you have your constructor here, okay? And then I have this before the constructor function window starts. We have this colon, and then there are some things that are defined here before we get to the constructor method, okay? And as you can see, I've defined one of those. I've set an initial value for my gain value. And so I've looked at this, and I've looked at the argument for using an initializer list versus using definition within the constructor. So initializing your variables and objects in the constructor. And there are some very passionate arguments on the web, and I would advise that you check them out. But if you can, the real kind of bottom line of the argument is try to use it. Try to initialize these variables using an initialization list rather than doing it in the definition. So I've got gain value here. I've just put a comma here, and then I'm just going to initialize this object here. So we got tree state, then we just need to use the processor that we want to connect to, and it needs a pointer here. So we're just going to point it to this processor, and then we're going to use a null pointer for the undo manager. So we got this and null pointer. Be sure not to put a semicolon at the end of that. So here's the end of our constructor initialization list, and then here we have the body of the constructor. Okay, so now we have this method. I apologize for my dog. She always wants to lick her paws when I start these videos. I do not know why. So I apologize if you can hear her in the background. So we got this method here, create and add parameter. We have a bunch of parameters here that we need to fill in. Okay, I'll do my best to explain those to you. So we got tree state. So here we're creating the parameter name. So we need a parameter that we need to modify, and here we're just telling it, okay, this is what we want to call the parameter. Okay, create and add parameter. Then we have all these different things. Okay, so we have these parameter IDs, parameter name, label text. So these are just the names that we give it when when the user is getting ready to automate a parameter. They got to know what they're automating. So we're just telling it the name of what we want to automate. Okay. Then we have normalizable range. So this is just the range of values that we're going to give for this parameter. Then we're just going to give it a default value to start with. And then these last two, I'm not going to worry about for now. So I'm just going to put null pointer there. So, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a define to, I've already done it actually. I've just used defines here just so I can keep from mixing up what I'm calling my ID and what I'm calling my parameter name. Okay, so I've got this define gain ID, just call it gain with a lowercase g, and then I've got gain name for the parameter name with a capital G. Just so when I'm working on the other side, it needs the ID. I can just say gain ID rather than saying, oh, is it gain with a lowercase g or with a capital G? It keeps me from getting confused. Okay, so when we're over here, we're looking for our parameter ID. I can just call that gain ID. And I can just call this gain name. Okay, I'll just call this gain name again, just for simplicity. Okay, now this normalizable range, I'm just going to create a normalizable range. Okay, just going to call it type float. So this just gives me the range of the values that I want the gain to be. So I'll just call this, I don't want to call it gain value. So I'll just call it gain range. Okay, and I'll just put this from 0 to 1 for now. Okay, so then I can just go over here and I can just say gain range. Okay, default value I'll just set at 0.5 for now. And then these last two, as I said before, we're not going to worry about. Okay, and that should be fine. Okay, so now let's just build this quick, see if we've got everything right up to this point. And it's fine. Okay, so now we got our gain, we've got a parameter created. So now we need to go to the plugin editor side and we need to create a corresponding slider attachment. Okay, and we're just going to do that by going back to our class, our API here. So we have all processor value state tree. Then you have these different classes that you can use. I'm just using slider attachment because we're working with a slider. Okay, so if I just click on slider attachment just to see what I need to do, I can just call this audio processor value state tree, value tree state slider attachment. Okay, and then I'm going to call this I'm just going to call this slider attach. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a now this is now I'm going to use a pointer here. The reason I'm using a pointer is because it's a value that I want to modify, be able to modify in real time. Okay, so as this is doing this, I need it in real time to tell the corresponding processor audio processor values tree state object that, hey, I'm changing the value here. Okay, so what I'm going to use here, I'm going to use a scoped pointer. Okay, rather than a raw pointer with an asterisk. The reason is that if I used a raw pointer here, then I would need to worry. I would need to concern myself with when I need to delete this object when I'm finished with it. Okay, but with a scoped pointer, it's the type of smart pointer, and it'll automatically delete when it's out of scope. Okay, so if you don't know what I mean when I'm talking about that, it's something that, once again, you can get a lot deeper into the discussion with this, but that's just the kind of basics of why I'm using the scoped pointer here. And if you don't know what I mean, then I will connect you with an article which tells a little bit more in depth about different types of smart pointers and times when those need to be used. So that's what we have here. Okay, now in our editor, we are just going to use new. So we're talking about a pointer here. So we're going to call slider attach. We're going to use the new keyword equals new. And then this is just the type of object that we're creating. So we got audio process. I'm just going to copy and paste it here for simplicity. Okay, so now we have a couple different arguments that we need to make. So we've got the state that we need to control. So this is just the corresponding object on our processor side. Okay, and if you remember, we called that tree state. So, and to access the processor side, the processor object here, and the variables that are in there, we have this this reference that's created for us nicely called processor. Okay, so this allows us to access the variables that we have on the processor side. So I could just call this processor dot, and I called it tree state. Okay, so we have our audio processor value tree state object here, and here it is. It's called tree state. Okay, so it's processor dot tree state. Okay, then we have the parameter ID. So this is the part where I said I created those defines. So just so I'm not thinking, is it gain with a capital G or gain with a lowercase g? I can just type gain underscore ID. Okay. And if you're wondering how that's happened, how I was able to access that without saying processor processor.gain ID, remember that these defines are happening pre-processor. So these are getting these are getting processed before we get into any processor, any other building. So that's how I'm able to access that without having to say processor dot gain ID. Okay, and then all we need here is slider that we want to control. I'm just going to put gain slider because that's the one that we're looking to control. Okay, so here I think we're fine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and build this and test this out. Okay, let's just open our Ableton project. If any of those parts, as I always say, if any of those parts are unclear to you, just drop me a comment below or a message, and also if there's anything that's like unclear, and if I have any more experienced users that are checking out this video, then and a part is unclear or that I haven't quite explained it well enough, feel free to let me know. I don't know everything, so feel free to chime in and let us know, and give us some more knowledge. Okay, so I'm just gonna put this on here. Hopefully I won't blow my ears out. Okay, great. So what we should have when I click on this arrow, here we are. We have this parameter. It's called gain. Okay, and when I raise it and when I lower it, we can see that the red line corresponding to the automation is moving. Okay, and if I move the slider itself, it does it as well. Okay, so I can take this and I can automate it over time, should I wish. Okay, and we just want to make sure that this slider is actually moving as well, so that the communication between the parameter itself and the slider is fine. And as you can see, it's moving fine. Okay, so we're just going to do one more thing to make our design a little bit better, which is we're going to put this into logarithmic. We're going to make this a logarithmic scalar multiplier, so that we're able to have those logarithmic range that we discussed last tutorial. So we're getting gain. So we're getting values between 0 and 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to change these values. Okay, we just need to make sure that we get all of our initializations. We don't miss any of them, because it will mess us up if we miss something. So I'll put it between -48 and 0. Then I will change this to, let's just change it to -5.0. Okay, then on the processor side, okay, we got gain value. I will just put this at -5.0, just so it corresponds to our slider. And then under our gain range, we need to just change that as well, make that the same. So it might be advisable to actually make variables, just so we don't have to keep writing these raw numbers in here. But I'm just gonna leave it like that for now. So then we just need to implement our logarithmic equation. Okay, I went through that last tutorial, so I'm not gonna worry about that. So I'm trying to explain that again. So I'm gonna put this in parentheses just so we can, so the math doesn't get murky and anybody that's reading the code can understand right away what's happening. So we got PAL 10. So we're going to the power of 10. And then we got gain value, which is producing values now between -48 and 0. And it's gain value divided by 20. And that will give us a scalar multiplier that's given us our values between 0 and 1. But now it's happening on a logarithmic scale that so we get full use of our slider. Okay, so we're just going to compile that again. Code succeeded. And now we're just going to go back into the project and open it up again. And hopefully we should be fine. So apologies that this takes so long. I actually have so many applications down here. And I actually looked at the other day of which ones I can delete. And I can't actually delete any of these because I do happen to use all of them. So yeah, so sorry it takes so long. Okay, so here we have our slider. So default is -5. Okay. Oh, what have I done? Oh no, something's messed up. we're fine. Okay, I just needed to delete the old one and instantiate the new one. Okay, so we have, okay, only thing is our gain here is between 0 and 1 still. Okay, and we need to change that. What's happened there? Oh, I think it's because it's normalizing the values. Let me just go back up here and see. Yeah, because it's so from what I was reading before on this normalizable range, it was explained to me that some DAWs prefer a normalized range for the automation between 0 and 1. So even though we have -48 to 0 on the slider itself, we have a normalized range between 0 and 1 on the actual parameter itself. Okay, so it's just saying, do you want it at full at the full range, or down here at 0? Okay, so that's fine the way that is. Okay, let's just try to automate that over time. Okay, and it automates fine. Okay, and let's just make sure that this is on our logarithmic scale. Okay. And yes, it's on our logarithmic scale, so it's producing that effect that we're able to use and range across the whole slider. Okay. So that's where I'm going to end the tutorial for now. Next tutorial, what we're going to do is look at creating, taking a state of the slider. So, pardon me, if I wanted to save a preset or save a state for the slider itself, that when I close this project out, I reopen it and it still has the project at the same value. How would we do that? And we will do that for the next tutorial. So any questions or anything, just drop me a comment or a message, and I'll see you next time.